Eleanor never expected to hear those words. "We sold the house. Don't come back." She froze, staring at the email on her tablet, the words echoing in the quiet of her sunlit kitchen. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the faint smell of toast couldn't mask the weight in her chest. She had spent the morning arranging the table for breakfast, setting out her late husband's favorite mug, a small act of comfort that now felt hollow. Memories of him, his gentle laugh, and the way he always reminded her to take a breath, filled her mind, leaving a tight ache behind her eyes. Across town, Madison was perched in her sleek office, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a smirk playing across her lips as she scrolled through emails on her laptop, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing at home. Eleanor's fingers brushed the edge of the counter, steadying herself, and then she returned to the papers spread across the dining table, scanning every line for a clue, a loophole, anything that might give her a sense of control. Hours passed in silent concentration, the afternoon sun shifting across the room, highlighting the quiet determination in her eyes. She found it, a subtle inconsistency buried deep within the documents, enough to give her leverage if she played her cards correctly. By evening, Eleanor had meticulously arranged the scene in the living room, placing the documents neatly on the coffee table, ensuring every detail was visible, every angle calculated. When Madison walked through the door, expecting the usual polite conversation, she was met with a calm, unwavering gaze from Eleanor. The air between them was taut, thick with unspoken words and restrained emotion. Eleanor began to lay out the findings, her voice measured, almost serene, yet every word carried the weight of truth and authority, revealing the careful missteps and oversights that Madison had assumed would remain hidden. Madison's confident composure faltered, a subtle shift in her posture betraying the surprise and unease beneath her polished exterior. Robert lingered near the hallway, uncertain, caught between loyalty and shock, observing the exchange, unable to intervene. Eleanor maintained her composure, her hands resting lightly on the edges of the documents, her eyes locked on Madison's, conveying a message more powerful than any outburst could. She was not a passive observer. She was reclaiming her presence, her dignity, her rightful place. As the conversation drew to a close, Eleanor slowly stood and moved toward the window, sunlight illuminating her silver hair and casting long shadows across the hardwood floor, leaving Madison in a quiet, unsettled pause, the tension lingering as Eleanor's faint, knowing smile hinted at the chapters yet to unfold, promising that the story was far from over and that she would navigate the challenges ahead with quiet resolve and unshakable poise. Eleanor sat back in the armchair, the evening light filtering through the half-open blinds, casting striped shadows across the living room floor. Her hands rested lightly on the armrests, still warm from the tea she had poured herself earlier, the faint scent of chamomile filling the air. She let her eyes wander over the familiar furnishings, each piece a memory of quieter days, of laughter shared with her late husband, of holidays and birthdays long past. The documents on the coffee table still reflected the sunlight, reminding her that the small victories she had uncovered were only the beginning of a larger plan, a careful weaving of patience and strategy. Madison lingered awkwardly near the doorway, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, the confident posture she had worn in her office now slightly diminished, the precision of her tailored outfit clashing with the uncertainty in her expression. Robert hovered in the background, unsure how to navigate the tension that now hung over the room like a delicate glass ornament, ready to shatter at the slightest movement. Eleanor sipped her tea slowly, each sip a moment to collect her thoughts, to measure the next step with quiet deliberation, her mind running through every possible reaction, every potential misstep. Outside, the sky deepened to a rich amber, and the first hints of night crept into the corners of the house, providing a calm backdrop to the storm of emotions within. Eleanor spoke, her voice calm, measured, yet carrying the weight of unspoken authority, outlining gently but firmly the inconsistencies she had found, the oversights that had been assumed invisible, each word landing with clarity, compelling Madison to pause, to reconsider the assumptions she had held all afternoon. Madison nodded, small adjustments in posture betraying the realization that Eleanor was no longer a passive participant in her own home, that every move had been anticipated, every weakness noted. The tension slowly shifted, not through overt confrontation, but through the unassailable presence of a woman who had lived long enough to know the value of patience, the strength that comes from calm observation and quiet persistence. Eleanor folded her hands over her lap, maintaining a steady gaze, feeling the subtle shift in control as the room adjusted to the balance she now asserted, the air lighter with the clarity of intentions, even as questions of what would come next hovered unspoken. Robert stepped closer, drawn by the sense of order returning to a room that had felt unsettled for weeks, his eyes flicking between mother and wife, witnessing the subtle dance of authority, influence, and strategy. The evening deepened, yet the room remained illuminated by the confidence of Eleanor, her calm demeanor providing a sense of inevitability, a quiet promise that the next days would unfold under her careful watch. Each decision made with consideration, each action weighted with purpose, leaving Madison and Robert alike aware that the tides had shifted, and that Eleanor's presence was no longer one to be underestimated or ignored. Eleanor woke early the next morning, the soft light of dawn spilling through the kitchen window, painting the hardwood floor in warm golds and ambers. She moved with deliberate calm, preparing breakfast with precise movements, setting out the plates, utensils, and a small bouquet of fresh flowers she had arranged the night before. Her silver hair glinted in the early light as she glanced at the papers resting on the living room table, reminders of the careful observations she had made and the quiet strategies she had put into motion. The house was silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirping of birds outside, a stark contrast to the emotional tension of the previous evening. Madison had already left for work, her presence only faintly lingering in the memory of yesterday's confrontation, her poised confidence now shadowed by the subtle unease that Eleanor's actions had instilled. Robert moved quietly around the house, offering small gestures of assistance, though a thoughtful frown creased his forehead as he reflected on the shifting dynamics he had witnessed, unsure how to navigate the delicate balance between his mother and his wife. Eleanor poured herself a cup of tea, inhaling its calming scent, and allowed herself a moment to breathe, to plan, to consider the steps that would follow. Each thought was deliberate, measured, and grounded in logic, reflecting decades of experience and a profound understanding of human nature. As the morning progressed, Eleanor reviewed correspondence, made careful notes, and prepared a list of priorities for the day, her movements precise and purposeful. She considered each action carefully, aware of the potential impact, but never hurried, never letting emotion overtake reason. The quiet was punctuated by the soft tapping of fingers on paper and the distant murmur of traffic outside, reinforcing the separation between the calm within and the world beyond the walls. When Robert entered the kitchen to retrieve his morning coffee, he hesitated, sensing the resolute calm in his mother, a contrast to the uncertainty he felt about the past few days. Eleanor offered a gentle, knowing smile, acknowledging his presence but keeping her focus firmly on the tasks before her. The day unfolded slowly, each moment carrying weight, each movement a quiet assertion of control and careful observation. By afternoon, Eleanor had methodically organized the household affairs, checked schedules, and reviewed her notes again, ensuring no detail was overlooked, preparing herself for the moments ahead. The calm authority she exuded was both subtle and commanding, creating an atmosphere where every participant in the house adjusted to her pace, her judgment, and her quiet yet unyielding presence. Even as she moved through familiar rooms, arranging objects, straightening documents, and performing small domestic rituals, there was a sense of anticipation, a quiet tension that promised forthcoming revelations. Eleanor's awareness of each person's reactions, the smallest expressions, the briefest pauses, allowed her to gauge the emotional landscape, and she responded with measured gestures, thoughtful words, and precise actions, maintaining composure and clarity. As the sunlight shifted, casting gentle shadows across the walls, Eleanor took a final moment by the window, sipping her tea, surveying the orderly space, and feeling the sense of preparedness settle over her. She knew the day was structured, controlled, and purposeful, and that her presence, steady and assured, would continue to shape the environment around her, leaving Madison and Robert to navigate the evolving dynamics with respect for the calm, strategic authority Eleanor embodied. Eleanor moved through the late afternoon with quiet precision, her steps deliberate across the living room floor, sunlight fading slowly and casting long, soft shadows on the walls. She paused by the bookshelf, lightly adjusting a photograph of her late husband, a subtle sigh escaping as she reflected on the days when the house had been filled with laughter and warmth. The documents she had prepared earlier lay neatly on the coffee table, their presence a silent testament to her careful planning and strategic thinking. Madison returned from work, stepping into the familiar foyer with a soft click of her heels on the hardwood, a practiced smile on her lips as she carried her briefcase inside. Yet the faint tension in her posture betrayed a lingering unease from the morning's subtle confrontations. Robert lingered near the doorway, observing quietly, aware of the shifting balance and the unspoken rules now being established in the household. Eleanor invited Madison to sit across from her, placing a cup of tea gently on the table, the aroma wafting between them, bridging the gap of civility while maintaining her own authority. As they exchanged measured words, Eleanor spoke with clarity and calm, detailing the steps she had taken, the observations she had recorded, and the evidence she had collected, each statement precise and deliberate, leaving Madison to process and react within the boundaries Eleanor controlled. The afternoon light softened, highlighting Eleanor's composed demeanor, her calm authority commanding the space without the need for raised voices or overt gestures, demonstrating that quiet resolve could carry the weight of influence more effectively than force. Madison shifted slightly, her confident front faltering as Eleanor maintained a steady gaze, signaling the subtle shift in household dynamics. The room now resonating with the understanding that Eleanor's presence was no longer passive but active and deliberate. Robert moved closer, drawn by the quiet intensity of the exchange, sensing the unspoken narrative unfolding before him, the nuances of control, observation, and measured strategy playing out between his mother and his wife. Eleanor's attention remained unwavering, her expressions and gestures carefully moderated, projecting a balance of empathy and firmness that reinforced her position, allowing Madison to see the respect she commanded without provocation. Each moment in the room, from the tilt of Eleanor's head to the placement of her hands on the table, conveyed intent, patience, and foresight, emphasizing that authority could be asserted without confrontation, and influence could be gained through subtle clarity and methodical action. The house, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, reflected the calm, yet deliberate energy that Eleanor embodied. The familiar surroundings transformed into a stage for quiet assertion and thoughtful planning, leaving both Madison and Robert to navigate the evolving household dynamics, fully aware of Eleanor's presence, judgment, and unwavering composure as the evening settled into a reflective calm, hinting at decisions yet to be made and outcomes that would unfold in the days ahead. Eleanor spent the morning in quiet preparation, moving through the house with deliberate precision, arranging documents and reviewing notes, her movements calm and measured. The sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the familiar contours of the living room, the gentle shadows accentuating the order she maintained. Madison entered later, carrying a folder of her own, her confident demeanor tempered by the subtle awareness of the previous day's exchanges. Eleanor offered a polite, measured nod, maintaining an air of courtesy while her eyes conveyed the depth of her observation and understanding. Robert lingered nearby, unsure where to position himself as he watched the interplay of strategy and composure unfold. Eleanor's attention remained focused, noting Madison's body language, her tone of voice, the smallest gestures, each providing insight into intentions and reactions. Over tea, they discussed household matters, schedules, and errands, Eleanor steering the conversation with gentle authority, her presence dominating the space not through volume or aggression, but through meticulous attention to detail and clarity of thought. The atmosphere was charged with quiet tension, each participant aware of the evolving dynamics and the subtle power shifts taking place. Eleanor occasionally paused, considering the impact of each word, each movement, allowing Madison space to respond, yet ensuring that the rhythm of control remained steady. Afternoon sunlight shifted, warming the hardwood floors and casting a golden glow on the documents laid out neatly, a visual reminder of Eleanor's careful preparation and strategic insight. Madison, sensing the patience and measured authority in Eleanor's demeanor, adjusted her approach, speaking with more caution, weighing her words carefully, yet the underlying unease remained. Robert watched, absorbing the scene, noting the calm, deliberate manner in which Eleanor conducted herself, her ability to navigate the household with intelligence and quiet strength, balancing diplomacy and assertion without haste or agitation. Eleanor's mind remained alert, anticipating potential missteps, planning subsequent actions, and maintaining a composed vigilance that reinforced her position and influence. As the afternoon waned into early evening, the house retained a serene, controlled ambience, the outside world fading into the background, leaving the interactions within the home to unfold with subtlety, precision, and thoughtful attention. Eleanor moved gracefully between rooms, checking arrangements, straightening papers, and maintaining an unbroken focus, demonstrating the quiet resilience and enduring presence that shaped the household environment. Madison, despite her usual confidence, adjusted to the pace and tone set by Eleanor, the subtle recalibration of authority evident in her careful gestures and measured speech. The day progressed with deliberate calm, Eleanor's awareness encompassing both immediate interactions and the broader context of influence and control, ensuring that her presence was recognized, respected, and effective without overt confrontation. By the time evening approached, Eleanor allowed herself a brief moment of reflection, sipping her tea by the window, observing the orderly spaces, and feeling the steady, controlled momentum of her plan, a plan that balanced patience, strategy, and the quiet assertion of her rightful place within the household. Eleanor stood by the window as the late afternoon light softened, casting warm hues across the living room, the quiet ticking of the clock marking the steady passage of time. She held her cup of tea loosely, fingers tracing the rim as she reflected on the careful measures she had taken over the past days, the small victories that had shifted the household dynamic without a single raised voice. Madison sat across the room, her usual air of certainty tempered by the subtle, unspoken acknowledgement of Eleanor's influence, the careful glances and measured words she used a sign that the balance of authority had quietly changed. Robert hovered nearby, hesitant but attentive, noting the calm command in his mother's demeanor, recognizing the thoughtfulness and restraint that had guided her actions. Eleanor moved slowly to straighten a photograph on the mantel, the image of her late husband bringing a gentle smile and a quiet reminder of the resilience that had always defined her. The sunlight shifted, illuminating the arrangement of objects around the room, each item reflecting her meticulous care and thoughtful organization, reinforcing a sense of stability and control that extended to every corner of the household. She set the cup down and glanced toward Madison, who adjusted her posture, the subtle tension in her movements signaling the recognition of Eleanor's steady, unwavering presence. Eleanor's voice broke the silence, calm and measured, offering observations and suggestions for upcoming tasks, her tone neutral yet authoritative, demonstrating that influence could be maintained through poise and precision rather than confrontation. The room was filled with the quiet hum of domestic life, the faint rustle of papers, the soft murmur of the air conditioning, each sound underscoring the controlled atmosphere Eleanor had cultivated. She walked to the dining area, checking the placement of documents and small details, ensuring everything remained in order, reinforcing the environment she had carefully shaped. Madison followed with cautious attention, aware of the silent assertion of authority Eleanor embodied, responding in kind with respect and acknowledgement while recalibrating her own approach. Robert, witnessing the interaction, absorbed the subtleties, understanding the nuanced shifts in power and the careful orchestration of domestic equilibrium. As evening approached, the golden light faded into a softer glow, and Eleanor took a final moment to observe the household, satisfied with the balance she had reestablished, her mind already contemplating the quiet strategies for days to come. Each person in the room adjusted naturally to the rhythm Eleanor set, her presence commanding not through volume or force, but through measured decisions, clear observation, and the consistent demonstration of calm, deliberate action. The day concluded with a sense of resolved tension, an awareness that while the household remained peaceful on the surface, the foundations had shifted irrevocably, establishing Eleanor's authority, her foresight, and the quiet promise of continued guidance, leaving Madison and Robert fully conscious of the influence she wielded, the respect she commanded, and the subtle, unassailable power she held within the walls of her home. Eleanor woke to the soft light of morning filtering through the sheer curtains, the faint hum of the refrigerator and distant sounds of neighborhood activity filling the calm house. She moved slowly, deliberately, preparing a small breakfast, arranging plates and silverware with the meticulous care she had maintained for decades, a quiet reflection of her routine and attention to detail. Madison had already left for work, but Eleanor's mind remained aware of her presence, recalling yesterday's interactions, the subtle shifts in tone, posture, and glance that indicated a recalibration of influence in the household. Robert entered quietly, carrying his morning coffee, pausing for a moment to observe the serene authority Eleanor exuded as she moved from kitchen to living room, tidying and adjusting small details with practiced hands. Eleanor paused by the window, taking a sip of tea, and allowed herself a brief moment to feel the weight of continuity and stability she had begun to restore, recognizing the importance of steady presence in maintaining balance. She reviewed the documents on the coffee table, her notes meticulously organized, ensuring clarity and readiness for any future discussions, her attention to detail a subtle yet unmistakable assertion of her competence and foresight. Each movement, from adjusting a picture frame to aligning papers on the table, reinforced her calm, deliberate approach, the quiet authority conveyed without a word, only through the consistency of action and thoughtfulness of execution. Robert lingered nearby, sensing the unspoken lessons in observation and patience, noting how Eleanor's decisions were deliberate, measured, and strategically paced, offering him a silent model of composure and influence. The sun continued its slow arc, casting golden light across the room, highlighting the orderly arrangement of objects and documents, each reflecting Eleanor's careful attention and reinforcing the atmosphere of calm, structured authority she maintained. Eleanor spoke softly, outlining her observations and reminders for household matters, her voice steady and composed, guiding the day with clarity while leaving room for Madison and Robert to respond, adapt, and align with the rhythm she set. The house felt alive yet controlled, every sound, shadow, and movement measured against the quiet authority Eleanor embodied, shaping the flow of the household without confrontation, demonstrating that influence and respect could be earned through consistency, insight, and patient observation rather than force. As the morning progressed, Eleanor's presence filled the space, her awareness encompassing both immediate and broader implications of each interaction, her calm vigilance ensuring that the household remained orderly and responsive. Madison, despite her usual confidence, adjusted to the pace and subtle cues of Eleanor, her gestures and words now tempered by the recognition of Eleanor's composed and deliberate authority. Robert observed silently, absorbing the dynamics, understanding that the subtle assertion of control, grounded in patience and observation, commanded respect and shaped the atmosphere. As afternoon approached, Eleanor moved through the rooms with careful intention, checking arrangements, reviewing notes, and reinforcing the order she had established, a quiet but unmistakable influence settling over the household, leaving Madison and Robert fully aware of the measured, consistent, and thoughtful presence Eleanor maintained, shaping their responses and the unfolding day with calm assurance and strategic foresight. Eleanor moved through the house as the late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, bathing the living room in a warm, golden glow. She walked deliberately, checking the alignment of documents on the coffee table, adjusting a small vase of fresh flowers, and straightening cushions with a practiced hand, each motion reinforcing the calm, controlled energy she maintained throughout the home. Madison returned from a brief errand, carrying a small bag of groceries, and paused at the doorway, noticing the measured order and the subtle authority that Eleanor embodied, a quiet tension lingering in the space between them. Robert entered the kitchen to grab a glass of water, observing the atmosphere, sensing the careful balance Eleanor had established in the awareness Madison now displayed in response. Eleanor took a slow sip of tea, letting the warmth settle, her eyes scanning the room with keen observation, noting the slight shifts in posture, the fleeting expressions that revealed the underlying currents of thought and caution. She moved to the bookshelf, lightly adjusting a photograph of her late husband, a gesture that reminded her of the past and reinforced her quiet resolve in the present. Madison approached the table, setting down the groceries, her movements precise but tinged with subtle restraint, as she became increasingly aware of the shift in household dynamics and Eleanor's steady, deliberate influence. Eleanor spoke softly, outlining the schedule for the evening and discussing minor household matters, her tone neutral, yet carrying a calm authority that guided the flow of conversation and decision-making. Robert remained nearby, absorbing the nuances, noticing how his mother's measured actions and attention to detail directed the interactions in the house, establishing a rhythm that Madison could not disrupt. Eleanor moved back to the living area, placing her teacup down and reviewing the notes she had made over the past days, her mind attuned to potential scenarios and how to maintain order and clarity in any situation, reinforcing the controlled environment she had cultivated. Madison listened attentively, occasionally responding, her words tempered and considered, demonstrating her awareness of Eleanor's careful orchestration of the household and the quiet power she now wielded. The light in the room continued to soften as the sun lowered, the warm tones accentuating the tidy, deliberate arrangements Eleanor had created, each object and paper a reflection of her strategic thought and calm authority. Eleanor's gaze swept across the room, noting the subtle interactions, the small adjustments made by Madison and Robert, and acknowledging the evolving household dynamic with quiet satisfaction. She moved with graceful deliberation, attending to minor tasks while maintaining an overarching awareness of the space and its occupants, ensuring that the balance of influence remained in her favor without confrontation or overt assertion. As the evening progressed, the air in the home was filled with a quiet, purposeful energy, each participant adjusting to Eleanor's steady, composed presence, the subtle shifts in behavior reflecting recognition of her guidance and foresight. The household settled into a gentle rhythm, the measured calm of Eleanor setting the tone, leaving Madison and Robert fully aware of the thoughtful, deliberate authority she held, and the unspoken promise that her influence would continue to shape the days ahead with clarity, composure, and quiet confidence. Eleanor watched the sun set through the wide living room windows, the warm orange light spilling across the hardwood floor and illuminating the meticulously arranged documents on the coffee table. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment as she observed the calm order she had restored, the subtle shifts in Madison's posture, the careful adjustments in her tone and expressions, all signaling the acknowledgement of Eleanor's steady influence. Robert lingered by the doorway, taking in the measured interactions, sensing the profound change in the household dynamic and appreciating the patience and forethought Eleanor had applied over the past days. Eleanor moved slowly through the room, straightening cushions, adjusting a small vase of flowers, and ensuring every detail reflected the controlled environment she cultivated, each gesture reinforcing her authority without confrontation. Madison approached cautiously, speaking softly about minor household matters, her usual confident tone tempered by the awareness of Eleanor's composed, deliberate presence. Eleanor responded with calm, thoughtful words, guiding the conversation and decision-making process in a way that maintained balance and respect, yet subtly reinforced the re-established order. The afternoon light deepened into dusk, casting long shadows and highlighting the subtle expressions on each face, the quiet glances and attentive gestures emphasizing the shift in influence that had been achieved through careful observation and steady, deliberate action. Eleanor paused by the window, taking a slow sip of tea, feeling the serene energy she had fostered, the satisfaction of having reasserted her role and presence within the home, knowing that her actions had created a stable foundation for the days ahead. Madison remained attentive, responding to Eleanor's direction with a measured approach, recognizing the strategic calm and foresight that guided every interaction, while Robert absorbed the nuances, understanding the subtleties of authority and influence that Eleanor displayed without overt assertion. Eleanor moved through the rooms with careful attention, reviewing arrangements, straightening documents, and noting the smallest details that would ensure continued clarity and order. Each motion was deliberate, reinforcing her composed control and quiet confidence, the home now reflecting her thoughtful guidance and steady presence. The household settled into a rhythm of measured activity, each participant adjusting naturally to the environment Eleanor had shaped, acknowledging the thoughtful, strategic influence she maintained. As the evening darkened, Eleanor stood by the window once more, her gaze sweeping the home she had quietly managed, aware of the subtle shifts in behavior, the acknowledgement of her presence, and the unspoken understanding that her calm, deliberate authority had created a lasting balance. She allowed herself a brief, contemplative moment, observing the harmony and readiness for the challenges yet to come, confident that her consistent, patient actions had reshaped the household in a way that would endure, leaving Madison and Robert fully aware of the thoughtful, composed influence Eleanor commanded, and setting the stage for continued order, respect, and carefully measured decisions in the days ahead.